West Virginia mountain melody. There's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free. Your West Virginia mountain melodies.
Welcome to another edition of Around and About the Clarksburg History Museum. And my special guest today is Pastor Jeff Hanlin of the Central Christian Church of Clarksburg. Pastor, welcome today to our podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
We're real pleased to have you. And I wanted, first of all, if people are not familiar where the church is located at in Clarksburg, kind of tell us where that is.
Sure. The easiest description is it's right next to Domino's Pizza, downtown Clarksburg. We're at the corner of Chestnut and Pike Street, and it's a big 4-story building. You can't miss it.
Beth Gain, who helps me with the podcast, we were so thankful and honored to go and visit your church for a tour there last year. And I want to talk about it because it's an amazing building.
Thank you.
But first, just as a background, tell us a little bit about how your church started here in West Virginia.
Sure. So I want to take you all the way back to the Revolutionary War, 1776. So America was just at that point 13 colonies. And by the year 1800, only 10% of the people really belonged to any church because a lot of people had immigrated from Europe. A lot of people were born here, so there was a mixture, but it's still frontier, if you will. So there were the popular denominations then were mostly from Europe, Puritans, Anglicans, Presbyterians, Baptists, Methodists, and they were considered old world denominations. So at this point, right after the Revolutionary War, where America is still young, there's a lot of divisions in these denominations, if you will. And so because of the divisions, a lot of people just aren't happy with churches. So at the same time, America's expanding, starting west, and actually this part of the country was considered the West at that point because mainly, people had settled from the Northeast on down on the East Coast. So there happened to be a minister in the Kentucky region, and he wasn't comfortable with what organizational churches were doing because he felt that the denominations kind of separated people rather than bringing them together. And his name was Barton Stone. And in 1804, he formed a fellowship. He didn't like the word church, so he called it a fellowship. And so in his fellowship, he proclaimed that each individual had the right to read and interpret the Bible for himself. And he wanted the local church, all denominations, to be considered part of the body of Christ. In other words, a lot of denominations, you get the idea that they feel like, they're the only ones that are going to make it to heaven and so forth. So he thought everyone should be included. And at the same time, there happened to be a minister from Ireland who was at that time, it was Virginia area, but it's now West Virginia. Anyway, he kind of felt the same way. His name was Thomas Campbell, and he believed that churches didn't have the right to make confessions of faith for people, that they didn't have the right to make requirements of communion, in other words, exclude people from communion. And so he believed those were individual choices. And he was a Presbyterian minister, but what's odd is because of his beliefs, the synod in Pittsburgh wouldn't license him to preach or be a pastor. So he started having house church in the Washington, PA area. And he lived, I believe, in West Alexander, PA. In fact, his house is still there. If you go through West Alexander, you can still see it. And he had a study that was in the form of a hexagon, and it's actually still there. And he built another one in Bethany, West Virginia, which actually you can go see, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. But he started gathering in homes for worship, and out of these gatherings, he formed a group, and they called themselves the Christian Association of Washington, Pennsylvania. And their motto was, where the scriptures speak, we speak. Where scripture is silent, we are silent. And so it a little further later, this was in 1809, in Washington, PA, Mr. Campbell wrote a statement called the Declaration and Address. And it's actually considered the chart and compass for our denomination, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. It had two themes, and the two themes were unity of Christians and restoration of the principles of the New Testament church. In other words, in the New Testament, we believe Christ was born of the virgin birth, that he rose from the dead, and that he's coming again. And there were a lot of denominations that didn't quite hang on to all those. So Thomas Campbell came up with this Declaration and Address, and there's actually a historical sign in the place where that was written up in Washington, PA. I've been visited there as well. So Thomas had a son who was going to university in Scotland. He had graduated, and at age 21, he came to America. He read this Declaration of an Address, and he was so impressed that he just went full on in forming a church, and he got a group together. He was the leader of this group. And so in the year 1811, he formed this congregation called Brush Run.
Now, is this Alexander?
This is his son, Thomas's son. This is Alexander Campbell.
This is Alexander that you're talking about.
This is Alexander that I'm talking about. So in 1811, he forms this church, and I've got a picture of it here I can show you, but it's just a wooden building with a door, basically. And so that group later joined with Barton Stone's group in Kentucky, and they termed themselves, Barton Stone, he liked the term Christian Church, and Alexander liked the term Disciples of Christ, so they just put the two together. So this denomination is the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. So out of this began what was called the Restoration Movement, which you can read up about that, but it's important in that it was a movement, and churches started springing up all over the West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky area of this denomination. And Alexander Campbell, not only was he a preacher, but he was also a debater. He was an editor. He married a girl named Margaret Brown, and they moved to this farm, which at that time was Virginia, and it's now West Virginia, but it's in the Bethany, West Virginia area.
Now, where is Bethany?
So Bethany it's north of Wheeling. To get there from here, you would go to Washington, PA, and then take some back roads up to, it's almost up at the tippy top of the state of West Virginia. And there's not a whole lot around there because it's about 45 minutes from there to Pittsburgh. There's a couple small restaurants and things, but the main thing that's there is Bethany, the town of Bethany, and Bethany College, very historic. Alexander Campbell, being the type of guy he was very entrepreneurial. He, after he married this girl and moved to the Bethany area, back then it was called Buffalo, West Virginia, but there's also another Buffalo, West Virginia. And he began to publish a monthly newsletter, and it was called the Christian Baptist. And in order to publish it, it had to be printed. So he started a printing press right there in the area where he lived on his property. He would have to carry it by horseback to Pittsburgh to mail it because that was the closest post office. So he decided, I'm going to change my land into a town and start a post office. And he's already got his printing press. He started the post office, and he named the town Bethany. Bethany is the place where Lazarus in the scriptures was raised from the dead, where he lived. So at this time, it's Buffalo, Virginia area becomes Bethany, Virginia. This is in 1853 that Bethany was actually chartered. But in the 1840, education is important to him. So he starts this college, and he calls it Bethany College, which today is still operating. They've got several majors, and it's West Virginia's oldest institution of higher education. So he goes on being the leader of this Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and their very first convention was in 1849. There were more than 100 churches represented. Oh, by the way, he was also a delegate to the Virginia Constitutional Convention in 1829, and his big thing as being part of the Constitutional Convention was he was very big on democracy. Back at that time, the plantation owners had a lot of political pull. And he wanted everyone, he wanted to be fair across the board for everyone, the rich, the poor, the influential, the non-influential. So he was very democratic, and he was a big part of this Virginia Constitutional Convention in 1829. And I understand he had a part in Clarksburg, correct?
Yeah, I wanted to just throw that in there. I found this morning. He was the main speaker at the Historic Educational Convention in Clarksburg in 1841, where he argued for public education. It's very interesting. And I also read where he argued against an end to slavery.
Yes, he was very big on that as well, and very influential in that area too.
He was almost like a Ben Franklin, though, wasn't he?
Right, right. He was a very smart man, very intelligent. In fact, in his house up in Bethany, which you can visit, it's they call it the Alexander Campbell Mansion, and there's a historic sign there. He has what's called Strangers Hall, and he would invite visitors to come and visit in Bethany, and they would debate. They would talk about literature. Just a very smart man. And also, President James Monroe heard him preach at one time. James Madison, President James Madison. He listened to his preaching and called him the ablest, most original expounder of the scriptures. And his chair, the chair that President Madison sat in, is still there at the mansion.
Oh, that would be worth a visit to go see all of that.
And the mansion, you can go through it, and they've got the part of the original wallpaper that was there. There's an old piano that his daughter learned to play on. She would do recitals for this people who were visiting. Of course, the president's chair is still there. Very, very neat place to visit, because you've got the mansion. We have the Historical Society for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ is there as well. And by the way, stop there and visit, because there's a lot of interesting things from all over the world. There's a printing press from Africa there, lots of different things. And of course, the first post office in Bethany is there. So Bethany College, Old Main is a beautiful building.
So from that hub of Bethany, did that move down here to central West Virginia?
Sure. Of course, in the 1860s, there was a Civil War, and this movement, restoration movement that Alexander Campbell had started, kept moving. And he was also an advocate for women. And so there was, in 1874, a Women's Missionary Society was started. So all this time, the church is growing. And
very progressive,
right,
though.
Very progressive. And in fact, he was ahead of his time, I think.
Yeah.
But in 1909, there was a convention, and at this time, the denomination had more than 1 million members at this point in 1909. And that's the era when Fairmont, Morgantown, Clarksburg churches were started there. They would send preachers from Bethany College out to these cities to see if there was anyone that was sort of disciples-like and had the same beliefs. And so that's how the church in Clarksburg got started. There was a man named Linkletter that came from Bethany College, and he got some people together. In fact, I think the original members were 12. And they worshiped in the courthouse for a time.
Well,
that
that's
was
interesting.
In 1905, right? At that time, the courthouse allowed churches to do that. And so that group of 12 formed a congregation. And after they formed a congregation, they decided they wanted to build a building. So they purchased land at the present site where the church is. The land, I believe, was $10,000. And at that time, there was a produce house on it, as well as another house and another building.
Yeah, I think I read where they had to tear down several businesses there.
Yeah,
Meat market, a house, grocery store.
Right.
Yeah.
And
this was 1905?
1905. And between 1905 and 1907, they had an architect draw up the plans for the building. And when he finished the plans, then of course they started excavating. By that time, the congregation had moved out of worshiping in the courthouse to worshiping in the store that was on the property. And they did that until at some point they moved to another place to worship while the building was being built. And the cornerstone, I believe, was laid in 1907 or 1908, one of the two.
Let's talk about that building because
Sure.
it is beautiful.
Sure.
I think when we first walked in, it wasn't even a sunny day. I wish it would have been, but the stained glass windows are just awesome. I don't even know the word for them. They're so beautiful. It's like something you would see in New York City Museum or something.
I've had many people tell me once they came in and saw, they would always tell me, I always saw those windows from the outside and always wondered what they looked like on
Me
the inside.
too,
'Cause
Pastor.
you can't, from the outside, you really can't tell.
No.
But we do have several, they're called art glass or stained glass, and most of them are from a company called Yakagani Glass, which was still in business as of 2023. And they're based in Connellsville, Pennsylvania. And each one of these windows, the larger windows, depict a different Bible scene. And of course, one of them is called the Good Shepherd. Another one is Christ and the Doctors.
And they're different sizes. I mean, there's some that are
right.
life-size and some that are smaller. And
Right.
how many total windows, stained glass, are in that church?
So there are several. Even upstairs, we have one called the Dove Room, which that particular window is circular, and it actually mimics one of the windows in Westminster Abbey. And the round windows that you see in a lot of the cathedrals, it has a dove in the very center of it. Just beautiful. And I don't know exactly how many. We have 3 large ones downstairs, and there's some larger circular ones upstairs. Then there are smaller ones above the large ones we have in the sanctuary. So there are several, and these were all donated by families and Sunday school classes that were functioning at the time that the building was built. The building at the time cost about $20,000 to build.
Oh my.
The property was $10,000, so for $30,000. And here's another interesting story. So this is in one of our history books, and it's written that there was a particular Saturday evening where the men had finished working and they wanted to pay them week by week. And I'm just going to read the paragraph from the book. It says, "It was decided that all bills be paid each Saturday night, and this goal was never missed, although it involved sacrificial giving, borrowing of funds, and shrewd management. There were many cash gifts which were repeated again and again. However, one week it appeared that Saturday night might come without money enough to meet the bills. One of the stalwart leaders, his name was John McReynolds, now deceased, rode his horse to the home of an uncle, Mr. Charles Stewart, father of Mrs. John Craig, near West Union, and borrowed from him $3,000 cash for the purpose. The bricks were purchased partly at local yards, and the outside bricks were imported from Ohio. The pews and windows were secured in Pittsburgh." And it says the cornerstone was laid in June of 1907.
Are those your original pews in there too?
No,
Have they been replaced?
In fact, the minister that has been there the longest, his tenure he started as minister there in 1933, and he was there for 25 years until he retired. And during his time there, which would have been 1949 or 50, they decided to remodel the sanctuary. They put in a pipe organ. It came from a company in Hagerstown. It's still there and still operating, has beautiful sound. And they changed the sanctuary from a circular type pews to a chancel sanctuary, which are straight.
I'd love to hear that pipe organ.
Oh,
played.
yeah. I can do a demonstration
Oh,
for you.
I'd love that.
You're welcome to come by any time.
The sanctuary is beautiful too, the woodwork and everything. It's
Thank
just,
you.
just
That's
gorgeous.
all from the 50s.
Also, the pastor lived there in the church
When they
too.
built the church, they built a section on the left-hand side as you're facing the front that was the actual parsonage. And the idea was that the pastor would be close to his work and he wouldn't have to get rained on if it was raining on a Sunday morning, and he could just walk right down the stairs into the church. And so the 2 floors, it's actually a 12,000 square foot building, and it's 4 floors. And the 2 upper floors on the left side were the parsonage.
Yeah, from outside, it doesn't look like it's that big inside.
Right.
And I agree with the windows. You can't fully appreciate them until you're inside
It's
there.
a huge building and beautiful too.
When they first opened, what do you know the number of congregation members they had?
So they started with about 14, and as the years progressed, in this history book, it gives some idea. But at the time that Pastor Nelson was there, this would have been in around 1950. They had around 400 members. And in fact, it's stated in this book that there was some decline starting in Clarksburg at that point, where people were moving out of the city to bigger cities and so forth. And so some of the membership had declined at that point. And of course, it has continued since then. Clarksburg has lost quite a lot of business and population, and the decline continues till.
And all churches, I think, are suffering in
Sure.
the amount of members. It's just a trend that's going on, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes.
Talk about like some of the challenges that today you face with the church.
So the main challenge today, of course, is like everybody has. It's a money challenge. It takes, we have a gas bill, an electric bill, a phone bill, a water bill, and of course they like to pay me too, and we pay a pianist too as well. And with a declining congregation, there's always some money issues, because we like to help people out as well, and we're not able to do that as much as we once were. At one time, we had a food bank in the church. So that money's the biggest challenge. The other challenge is that as a pastor, there's so many people that have needs these days, not only just a relationship need, a need to talk to someone. Loneliness is a big thing I see. In an elderly congregation, there's a lot of health issues, so I'm constantly visiting in the hospitals, the nursing homes, and I like to keep in contact with these people who have been a part of the church for years and aren't able to. I have a lot of people that just aren't able to get to church because of their health issues. So that's a challenge, in that I do travel a lot to see people. Homelessness, of course, in Clarksburg.
Yeah, let's touch on that, because I want you to mention the books that you brought here today to tell me about.
Sure. The first book is called The Least of Us. It's written by a gentleman named Sam Quinones, and he's from Los Angeles. He actually documented the fentanyl and meth epidemic. He went as far as Mexico and actually lived among the cartels, watching the progression of how the meth and fentanyl got into the U.S. And so from there, he came to Clarksburg, and he documented what we were doing here in Clarksburg, the churches and other groups. There were a couple other groups that were working with the homeless, along with the mission. And at one point, the mission and our church and this other group partnered together, and as well as some of the other downtown churches. And we did a warming shelter a couple of different winters. And during the warming shelter, at one point we had 40 people that were homeless that were staying in during the night in our church, and this other group would feed them and then give them a snack bag as they exited the next morning. But it kept them, warm during the night. And these were winters where, it would get down to 10 degrees at night. And so a couple of them came to me and wanted to thank me because they had a place to sleep, and they were able to get up and go to these two gentlemen.
They wouldn't have survived the night in a 10 degree or less.
Right, at 10 degrees, it would have been very hard to find some place. So we did that, and I'm thankful that we did. Well, this gentleman, Sam Quinones, he documented in this book called The Least of Us, our story as to what happened. And it even follows one gentleman that stayed at the warming shelter in our church. They were able to talk him at one point into going to rehab. So during Sam's visit, we went to Wheeling and watched him graduate from rehab. And now that young gentleman lives in Montana. He's got a job, he's got a family, he's clean. So that's just one of the wonderful stories that happened out of that warming shelter that we hosted during that cold winter we had.
That's a beautiful story.
Very beautiful story.
You never know how one deed is going to
Right,
change
right. And out
someone's
of 40
life.
people, there was just,
But
that
it's
one.
worth that,
But
isn't
it
it?
was worth it, yes.
To go back after that lost
Yeah.
lamb.
And I can remember one Sunday while he was in rehab, I had our congregation, I just went to the dollar store and bought blank cards, and they filled out these cards and wrote him words of encouragement. And he told me not too long ago, he still has that envelope full of those cards from the
That's beautiful.
congregation.
That's beautiful.
So, very touching story.
And the other book from Dawn.
Sure. So this gentleman, his name is Dr. Don Worth, and he's a psychologist from Weston. He has an office in Weston as well as an office here in Clarksburg. His office here is called Family and Marital Counseling. He approached me right shortly after the pandemic and asked me he told me he was putting together a book of professionals, and he was getting 9 professionals in America and 9 in India. And he was including teachers, students, restaurateurs, clergy, entertainers, and he was getting them to tell their story of how their profession affected them during the pandemic and the lessons that they learned. So the book is titled Good News, Bad News, Who Can Tell? The Pandemic Reveals Wisdom. And there's an old parable called Good News, Bad News, but I'll not go into that. But anyway, I tell my story in the chapter about how our church fared during the pandemic because, we had the shutdown. So churches had to close at that point. And for 2 months, we had no one coming in the doors. So before we knew we were going to have to close because the pandemic was spreading. West Virginia, of course, was the last state to have a COVID case. But we knew we were going to close. So someone said, well, to keep everybody together and informed, why don't we start live streaming a little, 10-minute service every Sunday. And so I tell in the book how I took a crash course on YouTube on how to live stream because I knew nothing about it. And so I tell what actually blessings came out of it because I couldn't, as a pastor, do my job inside the church. So during the pandemic, I had to go outside, which I would call people in my congregation and I'd say, hey, I'm going to the grocery store for a couple other people. Do you want me to pick you up anything? And they'd give me a list. And so I would take the bag and set it up on their sidewalk and at their door, and they would talk to me through their glass or screen door, whatever, and I'd keep my distance, and they'd leave money in the mailbox or whatever for the groceries. But through that, I was able to, keep in contact with my congregation and find out what was going on in their lives. And it actually, it made me realize, the church isn't inside the 4 walls. The church is out there. And so I learned a little bit different way to do church at that time, and I tell that in my story in the book.
Out of a bad situation,
right,
good came out of
that. And the biggest blessing was the live stream, because by live streaming, some of my friends caught on that Sunday morning we were live streaming. So I would have the pianist come and join me, and we would keep our distance, but she would still be there, and it would just be me and her in an empty church, but we would have church, and she would play some hymns, and I'd give a little devotional, and it ended up, at one point, it ended up being an hour-long thing, So my friends started watching, and friends of my friends, and people that had moved away from the church, they had been a part of the church and just moved different cities. Their churches weren't live streaming, so they would join our live stream. So because of that, today I have people still joining the live stream from Florida and Delaware and South Carolina, and they're a part of our church.
So you're on Facebook?
We're on Facebook,
okay.
Yes. We have a Facebook page, and we live stream every Sunday morning.
And your Facebook page is called what? It's
Central Christian Church Clarksburg.
Okay.
And there's a lot of Central Christian churches, but this is Central Christian Church Clarksburg. And if you search for that, you'll find our page.
And when do you go live?
Around a little bit after 11 every Sunday morning. Normally I go in and we do the announcements and so forth. And then once that's done, we get online and start our live stream. And so it's 11:05, 11:10, somewhere in there. And we're usually done a couple minutes after 12. And recently, a great story out of that is there's been a young man that for 5 years lives out toward Wharf Summit and has watched our live stream. And he was a friend of mine from years back. And so he recently contacted me and said, you know what, I want to be baptized. And so this past Easter Sunday, he came to the church and got baptized, and
That's great.
He's watched us online for 5 years.
So anywhere all over the world, people can
That's
look
right.
at that. That's what we found out about doing the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done this before. I'm like you. I wouldn't know the first thing about live stream.
Mm-hmm.
But it's amazing how we have people from all over the world clicking in.
Right.
You know,
And,
Finland, England.
I'm finding friends from years back that I've forgotten about.
Yeah.
And also, one of the other blessing is some of these people from these outlying areas have started donating once a month or so, and because they feel like they're a part of our church family now, and they
I
are.
think it's great too for the older folks that can't get out.
Right.
They can still be a part
and
of the church.
there are a lot of people like that join us on Sunday morning because they just can't get out to church, but yet they can still be there.
How long have you been pastor at the
So
church?
I've pastored there. June 1st, I'll begin my 10th year as pastor
congratulations.
there. So, yeah, thank you.
And you also do the one in Grafton,
And
too.
I serve as pastor in Grafton. And we do the same there. We live stream. And we even had a gentleman from Mexico watching us there.
That's amazing.
On that live stream. So.
It's not a big world anymore, is it,
No,
Pastor? It's all
not
like
at
a
all.
little small community. So we're recording this in the spring of 2025, those listening. What's the future of that building? Do we know?
So the problem that we're facing right now is the building is large, the congregation is small, and the building requires more maintenance and work each year. The last roof we had put on was $75,000 to put on a roof, and that's been several years ago. So right now we have a problem with a couple of leaks, and we've got some plumbing issues and things that we just aren't able to take care of right now. So the board has decided that at this point, in order for us to survive as a church, we need to get rid of the building and either rent a small building or start having house church. So our plan is to continue the church. We just don't know how we're going to continue, whether it'll be in a rented space or someone's house even, but we're going to continue. And whether the building sells or not, it's been up for sale about 6 months. And we've had some interest, and the real estate agent, she's been working real hard with us on finding a buyer.
I hope we can keep that building because it's a important part of Clarksburg.
Yeah. In fact, as soon as the story hit, WBOI did a story on the sale of the church, and it featured some of the windows on the inside. A man who's a stained glass restorer from Indiana, he said, I've done this for 30 years. I've seen every window. He says, you've got a window that was made by someone who studied under Louis Tiffany. He said, only Louis Tiffany did that style of stained glass window, and you've got one of them. And so I looked in this history book about our windows, and it says the name of the window is The Light of the World, and it was actually a painting. It's a copy of a painting done by Holman Hunt, and there is an original of that window in Westminster Abbey in London. So we've got a copy of it, and evidently whoever created that was studied under Louis Tiffany.
So it's so much historic preservation in that building needed
definitely.
too.
Yes.
If someone wants to contact you to contribute to the church or just talk to you, how do they get in touch with you?
They can call my cell phone or they can email me. My cell phone number is 304-695-0196. My name is Jeff Hanlin, Hanlin, just all one word, @hotmail.com.
And we'll have Beth post that too in our comments.
Thank you.
On that.
I appreciate that.
I tell you, it's one of the highlights, I think, of my life to go into that church.
Well, thank you.
I've passed by that church a million times and always wanted to just go in and see it. And it's awe-inspiring.
Thank you.
It's
Everyone that comes to visit is in awe of how beautiful it is inside.
And so much history too.
Yes.
There too.
Yeah.
And that's why we love doing these podcasts here, because my goal is to try to preserve the stories of Clarksburg firsthand. because it's wonderful to have books and everything written about different buildings and everything, but when you hear someone personally talking about it,
Sure.
it's a great way to preserve
And this
it.
is 120 years of history
Yes.
on that corner in Clarksburg
On that corner.
started in the courthouse uptown here.
Yes.
So it's wonderful to talk about it.
And started
you
in
can tell I
Bethany.
get excited about talking about it.
I mean, I didn't know anything about Bethany. So
Yeah.
you educated me on that.
A beautiful little town. It's
wonderful.
very historic.
I thank you for coming by today and
you're
talking to
quite
us. And
welcome. I've enjoyed it.
Welcome to come back any
I
other
enjoy
time.
the History Museum too as well. People really need to come and see it.
Yeah, we're on Main Street in Clarksburg, and everyone calls it the Old Hope Gas Building, but it's the Board of Education building, and I encourage everyone to come out and visit. We have a wonderful collection. We're constantly changing everything. And listen to our podcast.
Yes.
It's real easy. The older folks say, I don't know how to do it. Well, if you go on our website, click on the menu and podcast, I think it's the first thing that comes up. And what I love about podcasts, I can listen to it anytime I want to.
And actually, the way I found you was I went to Google and just put in Clarksburg History Museum podcast.
Yes.
And it came right up.
And Beth has us out on these different sites, Spotify and Apple and all of that, which I'm computer illiterate and all that. But yeah, I like it because in the evenings, if I want to just wind down, I love to just pour me a cup of coffee and listen to podcasts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's really nice. But Pastor, thank you so much for stopping today.
You're welcome. It's been a joy.
And I'll close every one of my broadcasts by saying, make each and every day count because you are making history today. Thank you very much.
In the silence of your wildwood, to the rhythm played by every mountain stream, it becomes a lullaby every time that I come home to West Virginia in my dreams. West Virginia mountain melodies, there's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melodies. I feel secure in the arms of your green valley. There's a peace you've given me that's yours alone. Take me in like a child to the gentle of your wild West Virginia. I'm coming home. Your West Virginia mountain melodies, there's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melody. West Virginia mountain melody, there's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melody.